Good morning, everyone. My name is Saray Helms. I am our Community Relations Specialist here at Greater Nevada Credit Union. Joining me a few of my teammates. Michelle Hale, she is that Community Outreach Manager. She'll be assisting in the chat, as well as I have special guests from our Consumer Lending team. Joining me today is Kathy, a Consumer Loan Consultant with Greater Nevada Credit Union, and Elizabeth. She is a Senior Lending Support Specialist with our Consumer Lending team. And so they'll also be able to answer any questions during today's chat. So speaking of chat, today's webinar is a recorded presentation. We would like you to put yourselves on mute until the Q&A section. We will have a couple Q&A sections, and at that point, we welcome you to put yourselves off of mute to ask these questions, or you can ask them in chat. Greater Nevada is finding a growing need for financial education from our community members. Each month, we are showcasing a financial topic that we hope will help our community move towards financial wellness. If you're interested in learning more about these webinars, please just check out our website. It's at gncu.org, and you can search for the Greater Financial Wellness Hub or click on the Resources tab, and you can click right over to Financial Wellness Resources. Today, let me go ahead and share our screen. We're going to be talking about car loans. So let me go ahead and share my screen at this point. All right, Kathy and Elizabeth, can you give me a thumbs up? Does that look like it is showing up to you? Okay, great. So today we're talking about vehicle loans and options for financing. And I hope this will help you whether you're looking to buy maybe your first vehicle or finance your first vehicle, or maybe you've already financed a vehicle in the past, and you're looking to get maybe some tips on doing it better next time. So my name again is Saray Helms. I am the community relations specialist here, but I'm also a certified credit union financial coach or counselor. But I am not our expert on loans or car loans. And that is why I have joining us today our consumer lending team. And I will put their contact right here, as well as throughout this presentation, we'll be giving lots of links onto our website on more information that you can grab, as well as if you have questions after, we'll get those covered too. So I always like to start a little bit about Greater Nevada. We've been doing business since 1949 as a credit union, and I always love updating this number on this presentation, but we're achieving over 86,000 members, and all of those members are here either business or living in Nevada. Unlike banks, our members are owners of the credit union. They're shareholders, unlike stockholders. So some fun information for that. I do like to pause here. Luckily, as a credit union, we're able to give free financial education, no membership needed, to the community. But one of the things that really helps me out is, does this information help you? If you could just take a few moments and grab your cell phone next to you and just scan that QR code. By the end of this, we'll have another chance to answer these questions, but it should be quick 5 questions or so of how are you feeling about your banking, and did this maybe help you feel a little bit more confident, or are needing some more information? All of that helps us prepare our topics and what we need to give to the community. So it's appreciated if you can take the time. All right, a couple things in this workshop. So we're going to discover, is financing right for you, and is buying right for you even currently? Before this, I was just chatting about those electronic scooters. Can you get away with maybe just an alternative option and not have to buy? Can you get around that car payment? We're going to talk about that today. If you're ready to pick out a vehicle, let's talk about the buying process. Do you buy used? Do you buy new? What's the difference? And then there's lots of different options to when you're ready to get financed. Yes, you can lease and buy, but also our consumer lending team will talk us through or we're going to talk through at the end here. There's even lots of different types of car loans, but we have experts to help us with those. And then on top of our car loan, have you thought about the additional products that can maybe come with it? Are they the right pick for you? So I want you to pay attention to that picture down at the bottom. That is apparently 2023's most expensive car in the world right now. That's a Rolls Royce. And I just like to pause on this moment of going, a lot of today's topic, I'm going to stress that is buying right for you and can you afford the payment and everything that comes along with it. But I don't want to take away from the fact that cars do give us value. A lot of people like, and sometimes it's their favorite part of the day, driving that vehicle to and from work. That is where they feel value. So I am not here to take that away from you, but I'm here to see if we've planned to budget for it. Okay. So if you learn one thing today, as the saying goes, no home is worth being house poor over. Today's big topic is no vehicle is worth risking your financial well-being over either. Yes, I will argue that I think when I was growing up, a car was maybe a want. I wanted a car, and cars and families were a luxury. Now, I will argue that a car is a need, really, to be my most successful self and everyone's most successful self. I argue that a car is a need. So, but along with the ownership of having a car, it is that. It is ownership. So, we're going to talk about all the things that come with ownership. So, a couple things before you buy, we need to think about, yes, the total cost. And can you afford it comfortably? We're going to talk about what really is the normal and what can I afford later on. But yeah, we will have that monthly vehicle payment, but also consider some other costs that go along with it. We're going to have insurance, and that insurance typically when you're financing is asked to be full coverage. So I always like to give people the warning, so to say, in advance. Don't think that you can just get the most inexpensive coverage. Most financing options or where financial institutions, when you're financing, are going to ask you for full coverage. Okay. Registration on a new car can definitely be more expensive, maybe, than your old car. Have you considered that? Okay. Have you thought about maintenance? Tires. I met one person that said no matter what, every year they cannot seem to afford tires, and that is when they have to run credit and get a loan. So just considering that. And where do you live? That's going to consider your maintenance as well. Here we live in northern Nevada, which some people don't know, but we get heavy amounts of snow. Right? Are you ready for the maintenance on your car for that? Some additional products we're going to talk about later on today: warranties, gap insurance. What is that and what does it cover? And payment or debt protection. What is it? What does it cover? Again, this is just to give you information on, are these options right for you? You can opt in to them if they are a good option for you, or you can opt out. They're not required, okay? But know the difference. Again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but vehicle costs should be no more than 25% of your monthly income. I would really like to see that at 20%, but I get nowadays things are getting more expensive. So often we are pushing that to the 25%. So on that topic, let's talk about how much can we afford? How much is normal for a car payment? First thing you should do when you're getting a car is recalculate your expenses and figure out, are you ready for this? And not just that monthly payment, but all those other things that we mentioned along with it should be included in that 25%. So on this pie chart from the Credit Counseling Society, you can see here that the transportation is actually at 15 to 20%. So that's how much we recommend that you spend, including all of those other costs. And you can kind of take a quick look at the rest, the housing there, the food. Again, I know that vehicles are really important to us and they can bring a lot of joy and importance. And I understand stretching that to the 25%. But I want you to see the rest of if you stretch that to the 25%, what are you giving up on? Now, I don't want to say giving up on, but let's take a look at maybe today's costs. We always talk about things are getting more expensive. So here, housing is a large expense for us today. Now, we used to, and we being lenders, used to recommend, and we still recommend, I should say, we recommend spending no more than 30% of your monthly income on housing. But what I want to make people aware of is when you go get a rental or a mortgage, so whether you're buying or renting, you can now be approved for up to 50% of your monthly income going towards housing. And maybe you're excited because that can help you get approved, but that can also, if you're pushing that limit, can take away from things that we love, so to say, transportation here. So I want to see transportation's down to 10% down on this one if you're pushing that housing cost. So I like to give an idea of today's costs. Is your housing at 50%? And can you really take on that transportation cost? Not only the car payment, but everything else that comes along with it. Okay, so soak that in. Questions. I'll pause here. I think I may have, okay, I thought I saw comments come up. Michelle said you need to calculate all the costs of having a vehicle, and I very much appreciate that. And on that note, on Greater Nevada's website, and I'm sure your financial institution may offer something similar, go take a look at that car payment calculator. Put that in there and play around with it versus on interest rate and things like that. So at this point, I don't believe we have any questions, but Michelle, I'll open it up to you. Did you have any questions come through?
No, not at this time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, Kathy and Elizabeth, you guys can sit back and please, Kathy and Elizabeth, you guys are the experts. So, if you have something to add, absolutely throw that in the chat and we can pause and talk about it. Okay, so what to expect in the car buying process? I like to narrow it down to three topics, but there's really a lot that goes into the car buying process that I want us to think about before buying a car, right? Cars are really exciting, but let's not make it an impulse purchase because it is one of the largest purchases that consumes our budget, as we saw on those pie charts. So think of your wants and your needs in a vehicle. Okay, I like to use myself as an example. I use my car for daily living, daily driving. I also really like a car that has fold down seats for my work as well as for my outdoor life. Okay, but I could go without. I've gotten a way to hook up my music and charge it. Is technology very important to me? So think about these type of things because with each amenity comes with typically a cost. Is your Speaking of lifestyle, right? Is buying or leasing going to be correct for you? Again, I use myself as an example. I like to travel. How many miles am I putting on my car? And I like to go on the outdoors. So, what is my wear and tear looking like on that vehicle? Is buying or leasing going to be right for me? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, more in depth. Consider our total cost, like we talked about. I can't stress that enough. And then one other thing that I really like to stress is not only is that cost right for you, but is that loan term, which means how long that length of that loan is. Are you ready to take on that amount of payment for 5 years, for 7 years? Okay, think about that. And is your interest rate, are you ready to take on that interest rate for 5 to 7 years? We'll talk about refinancing a little bit later on. Okay, you don't have to be stuck in that payment. The biggest thing I can stress again, we're going to talk about, I always like to say, when you're shopping, biggest tip of advice I can say is don't go test drive the car and fall in love with it and then find out you can't afford it. Okay. That's like the old saying, don't try on the wedding dress that you can't afford because you know you're going to fall in love with it and not be able to afford it. And maybe your heart's either broken or you're stretching that maybe you shouldn't be stretching your budget to. Okay. Step two, we're going to be going through this process again, but you're going to gather the documents needed and we're going to go over the documents of maybe that you're going to need in the car buying process. Okay. And then when it's ready for the car loan. So let's go ahead and continue. Like I said, let's talk about our lifestyle when we're first ready to buy our car and we're thinking about our wants and needs. We're going to weigh a lot of options here. One of those options is new car right for me, is a used car right for me. So we can kind of compare here what a new car typically is in the financing world is less than 2 years old. That's one of my favorite questions is, well, how old of a car can you finance? And my team is on here to help me, that consumer lending team. But I would say in general of the financing world, no more than 10 years old. And you can kind of see that on the auto loans or the used auto loans down below. No more than 10 years old. The reason being, and we can kind of take a look at the new auto loans versus the used auto loans. The new auto loans are typically lower risk, and that means lower risk for the buyer because it's going to have a lot of safety features, right? And that also typically means lower risk for the lender because it's new. We're probably, you and I both, as a buyer and lender, are not going to have to worry about it breaking down. It's going to be reliable and trustworthy. And that's kind of one of the advantages about buying a new auto loan. Okay. Let's take a look at a used auto loan. I buy or have and drive a used car right now, but it's typically higher risk. My vehicle is older. Is it as reliable when it comes to the age, right? So think about that. Lenders also think about that when you're buying. One of the biggest things that I think I'm sure somebody would have brought it up in chat, but new auto loans, as soon as you get them, are typically depreciating. But again, I'm not here to speak of that. If you can afford that and that's very important to you, then that's okay. But right, that old saying goes as soon as you drive it off the lot, that it's depreciated value. So just keep that in mind. But again, vehicles are a need. So let's weigh the options of buying versus leasing. So buying, there's some benefits to it. You own the vehicle outright. There's also benefits to leasing. Okay, we're going to talk about those too. It also comes with a higher commitment, right? One of the first things I said at the beginning of this presentation of ownerships come with that. It is ownership, and you take ownership of when it's good and bad. So typically buying a vehicle is going to come with commitment. It could have higher monthly costs. That's one of the benefits of leasing that people go to is maybe we can get that payment lower for you. Again, weigh your options when you're thinking about getting a vehicle. Take a look at possible out-of-pocket maintenance for costs, right? Ownership could fall all on you again. Again, when I used myself as an example, I like to travel, so I am putting a bit of mileage on my vehicle. So buying may be a better option for me versus leasing. The opposite of that is there's typically mileage and wear restrictions, okay? And if you do not meet those mileage and wear restrictions, that can come with costly fees. So just be careful of that. I'll give you a few more moments to take a look at those differences up there, but I really want you to take a look of what's your lifestyle, right? What is the difference comes down to what is the different lifestyle that you live. Is buying or leasing going to be better for you? I worry about myself of the mileage and wear restrictions that I personally went with buying. Now, I've had to cover some car repair costs and things like that, but I'm hoping that it's less than the cost of maybe those wear and tear and mileage fees. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause here. Do we have any questions, Michelle?
Yes, so from my email, I have what happens if the dealership tries to take the car because they said I was not approved for the loan and I already drove off the lot.
Oh, and you already drove off of the lot. That would be a pretty unique situation. I would say typically, yeah, right? That is going back to that classic case of trying on that wedding dress that you can't afford. Worst case scenario, you are trying to get pre-approved from another lender, such as your bank or something like that, to make sure that you can take that. Worst case scenario, are you driving that back? Did you try on that wedding dress that you can afford? Michelle, did you want to add anything to that? And then I'll open it up to our consumer lending team. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I know that it's happened to a few of my friends.
Oh,
So, and it was just devastating for them.
absolutely. Can I ask if you're allowed to share, did they have to take the vehicle back?
Yes, they had to take it back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, they were uh definitely devastated. I think that there's other options they could have chose before they did that. Like,
You got it. And thank you for bringing that up. We are going to talk about ways to prevent that scenario from happening. Where to start when you're ready to shop, right? You've weighed out your options. You are ready for a car. You can afford it. Now, how do you get out there, right? I think this information probably could have helped them.
and that's all I have for now.
Okay, sounds good. I guess at that point, we'll go ahead and move on. So, we are now in voila, step 2. So we're going to gather the documents ready to hopefully go shopping. And you can notice that I didn't say immediately go to the car lot and start shopping. And we're going to talk about why. Okay. So things that a lender is looking for before you go shop to make sure you can even get approved. So you're not falling in love. The dealer says, I'll run your paperwork because there is a certain level of trust, right? I'll run your paperwork. Go ahead and take the car. What if you're not approved and you're having to bring it back, right? You've already been so excited to get that car. So let's talk about if we have the paperwork and we're ready to really even apply. So for the big things, anytime you're looking to lend money from a lender are going to be these blue boxes here. So I like to start on that first one, your FICO or your credit score. So what is your lender going to ask to get your FICO score? So our consumer lending would ask some personal information. Think of that information that's like going to be on your ID, as well as information to, yes, your social will be run when you're ready to buy. It will be a hard inquiry on your credit when you're asking to borrow funds. So we're going to ask for information to run your credit, such as your social security number. Okay. The next step is that debt to income, or if you've ever heard DTI, debt to income. That is essentially, we're going to be asking for your proof of income. How much are you making? And is it enough to cover the debt? What is that gap, that debt to income? Is your debt too high compared to your income? We'll ask for some proof of income to verify that. Along with proof of income, please correct me if I'm wrong, my consumer lending team, I would say generally in the financing world, they're wanting to see that proof of income 2, 3 to even 6 months back. Okay, so be prepared to have paycheck stubs that go up to maybe 6 months back. Okay. Your loan to value ratio. When we're talking about a vehicle loan, we want that vehicle information. What's the year, make, model? Does it have aftermarket, maybe wheels and things like that? What is the worth of that vehicle? We want to get a sense on that. Is it new or used, right? We talked about that. Okay. And next up, that little box is we like to look for reserves or assets when lending. This is a fancy word to say, what is the cushion? What is the safety? So, with a vehicle loan, we're going to ask for that proof of insurance. Like I mentioned earlier on, it's also going to be asked probably for full coverage insurance, right? And that's for the lender as well as yourself with maybe that higher cost of the car as well as the newer car. We need to make sure that if worst case scenario happens, you're covered. And we're going to talk about some options as well, additional coverage options, okay? Want to pause there just for a moment and see if I do have a comment. Thank you, Elizabeth. So you do not have to email question. Do I have to get pre-approved for going to the dealership? Thank you so much for asking. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit later on. So I'll pause. And if that question isn't answered by the end of this, definitely let me know and we'll get back to it. Okay. Let's go ahead. I'll go ahead and dive back in. I would say the biggest question you guys as in consumer lending can concur to this, and probably our branch staff as well. We get asked a lot, what is your interest rate on vehicles right now? Let's talk about that question. So, what is APR or the annual percentage rate? Well, first of all, just think of it as your yearly interest, okay? It's different than APY. How is your interest rate determined as a borrower and what affects your interest rate? I really like to ask, what is your rate? Yes, our rates as in lenders are typically determined by, well, one, the Federal Reserve. What are they based upon? But what's really nice about credit unions is, again, at the beginning of this, I said all of our members are shareholders. They're not stockholders. That's a big difference between credit unions and banks is when we make profit, we get to give that back to our members. And we can give that back in the form of trying to negotiate the lowest possible rate to the Federal Reserve rate, right? We're trying to get the least amount of profit on there because we can do that and have that flexibility as a credit union. Okay, so what affects the rates? A few things. The other thing that's going to affect your rate is you. Okay, so what is your rate is going to be based on your credit, the length of term that even your loan is. So, what term is correct for you? The longer the term could actually increase your rate, right? We talk about risk in loans. Can you pay it off in 7 years versus 5 years versus 3 years? So, typically, those 3 year people are going to be rewarded with that lower interest rate. Okay, so I'm going to answer that question that was asked in the chat. Should you get a pre-approval? So we've gotten our ideas of our wants and needs, what we need in a car. We've gone over our budget and we know we can afford it. We have our documentation and we feel that we are prepared. Now we can start shopping and start the approval process. Today, we're going to talk about that credit union or financial institution pre-approval versus going to the dealership or shopping private party. We can talk about that too. Okay. Both are going to give us deals on rates and products. I want to make that loud and clear. Credit unions, yes, we have flexibility in that. Yes, we're going to offer some extra products and we're going to talk about that, but so can the dealer. Okay. But let's talk about the credit union first. I absolutely cannot stress this enough. Again, don't try on the wedding dress that you can't afford. So, how you can avoid this is go to your financial institution, ask them for advice, and ask for pre approval. And what that essentially means is how much can I shop with? Based on my income, how much can I afford? I want to pause there. Not necessarily because you're approved for that amount does it mean you can afford it, okay? It is still up to you to determine how much Can you afford with your payment based on your other payments? When you're giving our consumer lenders your proof of income, you're typically also not giving them a list of all the other debts you're paying. Okay. So you, as a buyer, need to make sure you can afford it along with everything. When a lender says you're approved for X amount of dollars doesn't mean you need to push it, right? Back to that old saying, just because you have that much doesn't mean you should spend it. So keep that in mind, okay? Another huge benefit of that approval process is that pre-approval lasts for 30 days. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second, but you can use that pre-approval basically for private party sales and dealership sales. When you're going and shopping, you go up to, right? Say you've picked out a vehicle. Thank you. I'm already approved through my credit union for X amount of dollars. I'm ready for the loan paperwork. I'm going to go ahead and pause there because I did see a question pop up. Will my medical debt affect my pre-approval? That's a great question. I'm going to go and save that one for the question slide. The next one I see popping through, I get pre-approvals in the mail. Are they legit? We'll talk about that. Great questions. Thank you for asking those. I'll go and pause as we can compare talking about the pre-approval process versus the dealership process. And then once, I promise I'll get to those questions. Okay. When you go to an auto loan dealer, I just want to give, I guess, the warning that it does leave the open availability for a loan denial and essentially getting your heart broken, trying on the wedding dress you can't afford. How do you know what you can afford based on your credit on the lot by just looking at the price tag? Okay, you fall in love with a car, you go inside, they run it and says, actually, you're approved for this amount. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Leaves room for upselling. What I mean is, if you don't know how much you're approved for, they're going to try to maybe push you to a car that neither of you know is out of your budget. Okay. Next up, this is one of the biggest things I see is compared to the credit union pre-approval where that's lasting for 30 days and it's good for private party and dealership sales. When you get approved for that dealership, it could only be good for that dealership, meaning when they check your credit, depending on the credit bureau used, it could only be good for that dealer. So let's say you go to the next lot. What if they use a different credit bureau? This could lead to having multiple inquiries on your credit when you're searching for a car loan. And each time you're inquiring, that can lower your credit score. So getting that pre-approval process through your credit union or through your financial institution can potentially help reduce the risk of multiple inquiries on your credit. Okay, again, I will get to those questions a little bit later on because I'm hoping some of this will help us, okay? Selecting the right auto loan for us. So we would think at the beginning of this, I even said, can you believe that there's multiple auto loans? Right? We've gone through so many options, new versus used, leasing versus buying, all these different wants and needs, weighing the options. Now you're telling me there's different types of auto loans. Leave this to your lender. Of course, do your research, have that trustworthy lender, but your lenders and a good lender and good trustworthy lender is going to be able to walk you through the different types of loan options that they offer. So right now and on this screen, I can only speak on behalf of Greater Nevada's auto loan options as far as this point in time that we have to date, okay? So yes, we have that traditional auto loan option. We also have a first-time buyer auto loan option, okay? A credit rebuilder, a payment saver. So can you believe there's lots of different options for an auto loan? This is based on the buyer. We want this experience to be a successful experience for the buyer. So again, your lender should be able to walk you through the best options. Typically, the differences in these types of products are going to be the qualifications. What's your credit like, right? Maybe you qualify for that rebuilder loan, and that's going to be a better than actually getting you in that traditional, okay? Another thing that's going to be a difference is the term on this. Is it a longer term or a shorter term? And is that right for the buyer? And the interest rate can also be affected by this, okay? Another option that maybe we don't talk about, but I said that we would talk about is refinancing. At the beginning of this, I said whether you are shopping for the very first time or you've already purchased a vehicle and maybe you're here hoping to do it a little bit better or redo it through an auto refinance. I'm going to tell you some of the benefits and maybe when you can look at that. I also talked about some of the products that you can add on. Okay. Gap insurance, payment protection, and warranties. A lot of these products are offered, again, also through your credit union or financial institution, as well as your dealer. But I want you to know what they are. What are you signing up for? And they typically are going to come with an additional cost that's going to be added into the auto loan and onto your payments, right? Okay. First of all, gap insurance. I cannot speak highly enough of gap insurance. Um, Working at Greater Nevada, I've been here for 8 years now, and I was a teller or what we call a member service representative back in the day, doing teller and loans and opening accounts and things like that, as many of the people on the call do. One of the biggest things, or I guess disheartening things I saw, and I saw this time and time and again, was somebody had the worst case scenario happen of an accident before even their first payment. Wow. So let's talk about that worst case scenario. What happens when an accident happens? Remember, we talked about we need that cushion or that safety buffer to cover that loan. So gap insurance can help the buyer as well as the lender. So let's say worst case scenario happens, you do have this auto loan and there is an accident. We're going to say in this example, everyone is okay, but maybe worst case scenario, we have that vehicle. So we send off that insurance claim. What if your vehicle loan is worth more than what that insurance comes back saying they're willing to cover? Okay, so now we have a gap. Your loan is this much. Insurance is saying that they're only sending you a check for this much. What happens to that extra potentially hundreds or thousands of dollars left on that loan uncovered? Typically, if you did not have gap insurance, the buyer is responsible for paying that. So, yes, you could potentially be paying payments on a vehicle that you no longer have anymore that has been deemed total by insurance. So if you can get gap insurance, that can help in those situations. I highly recommend, right? We talked about cars depreciating in value. When you first sign that car, what if that car has depreciated in value quicker than that loan? Gap insurance could potentially help with that. Okay, payment or debt protection is exactly what it sounds like. That's to help you with your payments while maybe those emergency situations happen that you couldn't make those payments during job loss, health emergencies, things like that. We can have options for you if that is an option for you, right? Okay, so weigh that. Are you going to add that on or not? It could be right for you or it could not at this time. And warranties, huge to weigh a warranty option, especially versus new and used vehicles. Are you adding on that warranty? Do you have an option to cover the costs of vehicle repairs? Is a warranty right for you in the first place? And how much is it going to add on? Okay, let's go ahead. I think we have a couple more slides and then I will get to those questions. I have not forgotten about you there in the chat with your questions, but we are getting towards the end. So I'll go ahead and get through the presentation and I'll get to those questions at the Q&A at the end. So I promised that I would talk about refinancing, really that last auto loan option we would talk about. And there's definitely pros and cons to financing. I also want to say, right, for those first time buyers, maybe this is your first time financing, but it doesn't have to be the only time you finance, and actually the only time you finance this specific vehicle. If you think that you get a very high rate, but you work very diligently on paying your payments on time and your credit increases, and maybe you even have a raise at your job, maybe you don't have to be stuck in that interest rate anymore. So refinancing can benefit you for a couple reasons. So I do want to stress that considers refinancing if your loan is 6 months old, but really, I like to see people wait a year because we like to see a year is really when a lot of change can happen in either on your income and your job or improving in your credit score. And that's really when it would be worth to refinance. Okay. So refinancing can lower your interest rate, right? Has your credit increased? That can lower your interest rate. Has your credit score improved? This is a huge one that I can't stress enough. And I think I may have seen this come through the chat, but if you need to take equity out, have you considered refinancing your loan instead of getting a personal loan? Vehicles are at a very unique time right now where they're holding a lot of value, where maybe your car is even worth more than you owe on that loan. You could essentially refinance that car and pretend like you're buying it brand new and take that extra equity out and use it to as a personal loan for whichever reason, debt consolidation, home repairs, et cetera, et cetera. Your monthly budget changes, right? We talked about that. The one thing that I want you to be aware of if you refinance is just be careful of additional or duplicate fees. You are going through that reapplication process, and that may require, if there is an application fee, repaying that loan or application fee. But typically, your savings that you're going to get and getting that lower interest rate is going to be worth it. But weigh that cost, okay? Another thing to be aware of, you've heard me talk about the term of the loan, and I can't stress it enough. Talk about and think about what that term of the loan is with your loan consultant when you're refinancing. Yes, it may lower your payments, and yes, your interest rate may be lowered. But if you've had that vehicle loan for 3 out of 5 years and you've just refinanced it to another 5 to 7 years, you've just stretched that out. It can benefit people, right? That can save your payment or lower your payment. But is that the right option for you? Be careful when you refinance of what your term is. You can ask for that shorter term to make sure that I was only 3 years away from paying my loan off. Okay, well, stay there. Be only 3 years away, but maybe with a better interest rate and a better payment for you. Okay, we're finally at that last step where if you've gone through everything and you've deemed that you are ready, you can now start applying and shopping for that car loan. Okay. I wanted to pause because I did have a couple questions in the chat, as well as I want to cover if you have questions after today, who are you going to be able to go to get those questions answered? Okay. So, Michelle, I'll go ahead and pause. I do want to get to those other two that came through. If I go to a dealership and then change my mind and get a pre-approval, can I just do that through the dealership? Let me read that again. My understanding is if I go to the dealership and then change my mind and get a pre-approval, Yes, you can. But let's say you go into that dealership and they've already run your credit. At that point, as a buyer, you have the right to say, yes, I actually think I can get a better rate. Let me go run it through my credit union. Typically, when you're in the dealership, um, they're going to run your credit out and compare multiple financial institutions and multiple rates. Maybe a benefit of shopping at the dealer. But if you've already ran your credit at that dealer and now you're leaving, sure, you could do that, but you've already ran your credit. So just keep that in mind. Again, be proactive before you walk in that door. But yes, go shop. Maybe you're looking around the lot, not having your credit ran, just introducing yourself. Totally appropriate to then go, you know what? I'm going to go get a pre approval from my dealer. So I hope that answered your question. Next one I'm going to get to is, will my medical debt affect my pre-approval? Consumer lending, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, the correct answer is yes and no. The reason, yes, it could affect your pre-approval is if you've let that medical debt go to collections and it's affected your credit. At that point, it could affect your pre-approval process. Okay. Another reason medical debt could affect not necessarily your pre-approval process, but your buying process is the cost of that debt. Again, when we are pre-approving you, we are not calculating and asking for proof typically of the rest of the debts that you're paying. So you need to make sure that you can pay for that medical debt payment as well as that vehicle payment. I hope that answered that question, but please, Elizabeth or Kathy, if you wanted to add on to that, that's typically the only time I can see that medical debt would affect you buying a vehicle. Is making sure you can, afford that payment and making sure that doesn't affect your credit. Kathy, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so you stated that correctly, that if it does land on your credit report, it could be a detriment to your FICO score. And that would be the reason why it, medical could affect it. Um, and the debt to income is based on debt to income also considers your discretionary income. So that money that you're able to pay things that aren't on your credit report would include that medical debt. I hope that answers it, or I didn't confuse
Thank
you
you,
more.
Kathy. No, you made great points. I really appreciate you adding on because you are correct. Yes, a couple tips to think about medical debt. Appreciate that. Thank you. Our next question is, if I get pre-approvals in the mail, are they legit? Hmm, correct answer is yes and no. Again, so they could be. Maybe you're getting a letter from Greater Nevada that says, hey, based on right the information, you could potentially get a loan here. That could be right. Financial institutions have a benefit of we're able to maybe see that you've moved into our new neighborhood and things like that, and we're sending you a welcome letter and informing you on our auto loans and things like that. That could be legitimate, but I do always want to warn about pre-approval letters of sometimes they very much offer the too good to be true. There's a lot of fine print to consider in those pre-approval offers. So just be wary and careful of those. But I would say, if it is your financial institution, ask your financial institution. You can trust your financial institution. So if you get a pre-approval letter in your mail from them, go ask some questions, but hopefully today's webinar will help you weigh the options on whether that's even going to be a good option for you. Okay. So we're coming to the end of the time. I really appreciate everybody's patience as we worked our way through this webinar. Michelle, did we have any other last questions come through? Is anything still spiraling in your head? Please, this is our last really slide before I can tell you how we can help you after this. Go ahead, Michelle.
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay, absolutely. Sounds great. The questions that were asked were fantastic. And thank you for asking those because typically those are the ones that are regularly asked and regularly needing to be answered. Right? If one person has that question, typically multiple people do. So, I right now we do have some extra time, so if you do have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. But I also understand that a lot of these questions come afterwards, and we are here to help afterwards. So a couple resources I wanted to leave you with, and next steps is if you're attending today, Michelle just posted a couple resources and tools in the chat that can continue your learning after today on this process. So up on the screen, if you scan that QR code, it's going to let you access all of these free financial tips and resources. Again, you do not need to be a member at Greater Nevada to access these. A benefit of the credit union is we just believe that the community should have these resources to live greater, okay? So some couple resources for students. Michelle just linked these over on the right-hand side of the screen. We have about 5 to 10 minute click through or walk through courses through our financial education partners, EverFi. So she just posted some more about buying a car, payday loans, how to get the best financing deal when buying a car. So quick 5 minute walkthroughs. The other one I love to leave with is balance. We offer free financial coaching and counseling to our members and webinar attendees, right? Again, free to the community. It is offered in other languages. It's a confidential hotline that pretty much anything that you're wanting to know, they can help you through that budget, first time home or car buying, okay? Next up, again, one more time, I'm going to ask you if you have that cell phone next to you, if you scan that QR code, it should just bring up a quick little survey of questions. Michelle just posted it in the chat. This just really helps us gather information on, one, are we making an impact? Are we helping you live greater? What else can we do to help you live greater? Are there other topics that we would like to cover? Our monthly webinars are typically based on what our community is telling us that they are wanting and needing to learn. And a lot of this is based on this survey. So thank you again very, very much for scanning that. And I will leave us with a little bit of time on our hands, leaving a little bit early. Thank you again for allowing us to help you live greater. Michelle just posted in the chat. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us, myself, or if you have questions on auto loans, consumer lending processors at gncu.net. I'll read that again. Consumer lending processors at GNCU for Greater Nevada Credit Union.net. They can help you with loan specific questions. Yes, again, we are here for you. I am here for you. But if you also want to ask more questions, maybe that got you thinking about budgeting or other topics, feel free to reach out to myself or us at GNCU Financial Acceleration at gncu.net. Again, that email is GNCU Financial Acceleration at gncu.net. So again, thank you, Consumer Lending and everyone else for attending our Greater Financial Wellness series. For those of you that would like to know more, I will be sending out a follow-up email with that survey, as well as some information, including those tips and links that we dropped in the chat today. If you're interested in learning more about these webinars, again, please just go to gncu.org, click on resources, and you can go to financial education resources. These webinars are recorded and will be posted on that GNCU webinar link as well. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day.